The black SUV moved through the city like a shadow. Tinted windows, no plates worth remembering, and a silence inside that matched its occupant's mood. Caspian Varro did not ride through Halverton Park by choice. His driver, Reeves Moran, had taken the scenic detour after a three-car accident on 5th choked every other road leading north. Caspian had barely looked up from the folder open on his knee. Property assessments, port access rights, numbers that represented other men's ruin. He was not the kind of man who noticed parks. He noticed everything else. Exits, threats, weaknesses. But parks, the green, useless softness of them, held zero interest. Until Reeves slowed without being told. Caspian lifted his eyes. Through the windshield, in the middle of the paved walking path, two boys stood arguing over a soccer ball. One had grabbed it and was holding it above his head, taunting. The other had his arms crossed over his chest, jaw set hard, refusing to chase him. That posture, that jaw. Caspian's hand went still on the folder. The boy with the ball was laughing, a bright, reckless laugh. But the one with his arms crossed wasn't. He simply stood there, perfectly calm, watching, waiting. Like he already knew the other boy would get tired before he would. Patience as a weapon. Caspian had learned that at age 9, from his grandfather. At gunpoint. He did not realize he had said, "Stop the car," until Reeves had already stopped it. Caspian stepped out. The afternoon light hit him across the face, warm and gold, and he walked forward slowly, the folder forgotten on the seat. Both boys had dark hair, thick and slightly unruly, the kind that never laid flat no matter how hard you pressed it. Both had sharp, straight brows. Both had the same angle to their cheekbones, the same line of jaw that Caspian had last seen only in mirrors. He crouched down to their eye level 15 feet away, studying them. The ball holder finally noticed the strange man crouching and stared. His brother turned. 4 dark eyes locked onto Caspian, and the world went very, very quiet. They could have been photographs. They could have been a memory he didn't know he had. Every line of their young faces was an echo. His mother's nose, his father's brow, but his eyes. His exact particular shade of dark gray-green that his entire family had called Varro eyes, because no one outside the bloodline had ever carried them. Caspian Varro had never once in his life lost his composure in public. He lost it completely in the space of 3 seconds. He heard a sound from his left, sharp, short, the sound of a woman standing up too fast from a bench and catching herself. He turned. She was already half risen, one hand gripping the back of the park bench, her knuckles bone white. He recognized her face before he could stop himself, before the wall could go up. Mira. She looked at him like the ground had opened beneath her feet. He looked at her like she had just handed him a grenade with the pin already pulled. 8 years. 8 years and 3 months, to be exact, though Mira Elson had stopped counting at some point around month 14, when counting had stopped helping and started feeling like self-harm. She had built a life. A small one, a careful one, but hers. A 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaning shop on Mercer Street. A job as a medical records coordinator at Halverton General. A best friend named Petra Hollis, who brought wine on Fridays and never once asked Mira to explain the things she couldn't explain. And 2 boys, her boys, who were the whole reason she got up every morning and the whole reason she sometimes cried in the shower at night when no one could hear. She had not run from Caspian Varro because she was afraid of him. That was what people always assumed, and it was wrong. She had run because she had known him, all the way down to the marrow. She had known what his world did to the people inside it, and she had been standing at the edge of that world with 2 infant heartbeats growing in her body, and she had made a choice. She had chosen them. She replayed that decision every single day, and on every single day, she made it again. But she had never, not in 8 years, not in her worst nightmares, imagined it would be here. On a Tuesday afternoon, in Halverton Park, 40 minutes from her apartment, on the one day she'd taken the boys out of their routine because Dante had begged for it, and she hadn't had the heart to say no. Now Caspian was crouched in the middle of the path, staring at her sons with an expression she had never once seen on his face. He looked broken, not angry, not cold, not the flat, controlled mask she knew so well. Broken, like something behind his eyes had given way, and he was only still standing because he hadn't received the signal yet. Mira forced her legs to move. "Dante, Mom, do you know that man?" He was already asking. Dante, the observant one, the one who catalogued everything and said it out loud without filter. Luca was still staring at Caspian with that steady, measuring look that used to make Mira's chest hurt because she knew exactly where he'd learned it. Mira reached them in 6 strides. She put one hand on each boy's shoulder. "Mira, we're going." She turned them toward the exit path. "Caspian, Mira." His voice. God, his voice. She had almost convinced herself she'd forgotten it. Low, precise, the kind of voice that never raised itself because it never needed to. The kind of voice that moved through walls. She stopped walking. She didn't turn around. "Caspian, don't." One word, and she knew, with absolute certainty that 8 years meant nothing right now. That whatever wall of time and distance and silence she had built between this moment and the last time he'd spoken her name, it had just been demolished. Mira closed her eyes for half a second. Then she turned around. He was standing now, all 6'2" of him, with his white shirt open at the collar and tattoos creeping past his cuffs, and he looked exactly the way he always had, like something you shouldn't reach for but couldn't stop looking at. His eyes weren't on her. They were on the boys. Dante was watching him back with open curiosity. Luca had stepped slightly in front of his brother, a gesture so instinctive and so Caspian that Mira had to physically force herself not to react. "Caspian, how old?" It wasn't a question. His voice was very controlled now. She could hear what that control was costing him. "Mira, we need to leave." Caspian, "How old are they, Mira?" Dante, "We're 7. He held up 7 fingers helpfully. "But Luca's 3 minutes older, so he thinks he's the boss." Luca shot his brother a withering look. Caspian didn't move, didn't blink. 7 years old. His jaw shifted once, like he'd absorbed a blow that hadn't shown up on his skin. Mira kept her voice quiet and flat. "Mira, boys, go sit on that bench right there. I can see you from here. Don't move." Dante, "Are you in trouble?" Mira, "Bench, now." They went, Dante reluctantly, Luca with one long last look at Caspian that made the hair on Mira's arms stand up. She turned back to face him. He looked at her for a long, silent moment. In the background, the park carried on. A jogger passed, a dog barked somewhere distant. Leaves moved in the warm afternoon wind. None of it touched the space between them. Caspian, 7 years old. Mira said nothing. Caspian, "I need you to tell me." Mira, "Lower your voice." Caspian, "I am not raising my voice." He wasn't. That was the terrifying part. His voice was perfectly level and perfectly quiet, and his eyes were doing everything his voice refused to. Mira, "What you think you're seeing." Caspian, "What I know I'm seeing." Mira, Caspian, "They have my eyes, both of them. Don't stand in front of me and tell me I'm wrong about my own eyes." The words landed between them like stones dropped into still water. Mira felt the ground shift under her feet. She had prepared for many versions of this conversation over the years, long, rambling, tearful versions in her bathroom mirror at midnight. None of them had included him saying it that plainly, that early, that fast. She had always imagined she'd have more time to breathe. Mira, "This is not the place." Caspian, "Then tell me the place and I'll go there." Mira, "I don't want you in my place. Any of my places." Something moved across his face, brief, almost too quick to catch. Caspian, "You had 2 years. You had 8 years. That was my time, Mira. They were my time and you—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "I'm not going to do this here." Mira, "There is no here. There is no conversation. You walked past a park." Caspian, I didn't walk past anything. Caspian didn't reach for the phone, didn't look away. Caspian, I'll be at your address tonight. I don't care if you moved. I'll find it in 40 minutes. He said it without menace. That was the worst part. He said it like it was simply true, which it was. Mira, you come near my home and I will call… Caspian, who? Call who, Mira? The silence that followed that question was absolute. He turned and walked back to the SUV. The door closed without a sound. The car pulled away slowly. Mira stood in the middle of the path, her heart slamming against her ribs, and watched him disappear into traffic. Then she walked to the bench where her sons were sitting. Luca, Mom, that man looked like me. Mira sat down and gathered both boys into her arms and held on very, very tight. She called Petra from the car. Mira, he found us. Petra, found you? How found you? Mira, park. He drove past and saw them. Petra, he knew the second he looked at them. Petra, okay. Are you driving? Are the boys? Mira, they're in the back with headphones on. Petra, come to mine. Don't go home yet. If he said he'd find your address. Mira, he will. He absolutely will. Petra, come here first. We'll think. Mira drove with both hands locked on the wheel and her teeth pressed together, and she did not cry. She did not cry because Dante was watching her in the rearview mirror with those sharp 7-year-old eyes, and she refused to be the mother who fell apart in the front seat. She had not fallen apart in 8 years. She was not starting now. By 9 o'clock that night, the boys were asleep in Petra's spare room, both of them somehow in the same narrow bed, curled together the way they always slept, like two pieces of the same puzzle. Mira sat at Petra's kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and told the story she had been carrying alone for 8 years. Petra listened without interrupting. When Mira finished, Petra was quiet for a moment. Petra, you never told him. Mira, no. Petra, not when you found out, not during, not after. Mira, I found out 6 weeks after I left, and I had left for a reason. Petra, I know the reason. Mira, his world was… Petra, there were 3 attempts on his life in the year I was with him. 3, in 1 year. And he sat through each aftermath like it was a mild inconvenience, like it was weather. Petra, and you were pregnant. Mira, and I was pregnant, and I would not bring children into that. I would not. I made a choice, and I stand by it. Petra, does standing by it still feel the same now that he's standing outside it? Mira didn't answer. Unknown number, but the area code wasn't unknown. Mira stared at it for 2 full rings. She picked up. Mira, I haven't agreed to anything. Caspian, I'm not asking for agreement. I'm calling to tell you that a man named Conrad Steele had someone photograph the park interaction today. By tomorrow morning, he'll know the boys exist. The cold that moved through Mira's body was a different kind entirely. Mira, what? Caspian, Conrad has had eyes on me for 4 months. He's been building something. I don't know what yet, but if he identifies the boys as mine… Mira, they are not… Caspian, Mira, stop. The single word stripped the sentence from her throat. Caspian, you can be angry at me for the rest of your life. That's your right. But those boys cannot be in Conrad Steele's crosshairs without protection. And the only protection that means anything against him is me. Silence. Petra mouthed, "What's happening?" Mira mouthed back, "Everything." Conrad Steele had built his empire by being the second smartest man in every room and making everyone believe he was the first. He was 51, silver-haired, and wore his suits the way judges wore robes, like authority was a fabric you could put on in the morning. He had been Caspian Varro's business partner for 3 years before Caspian had discovered that Conrad had been skimming from their joint shipping operations, funneling money to a federal contact and positioning himself to take over the Varro ports when the inevitable arrest happened. The inevitable arrest had not happened. Caspian had found out first. The split had been quiet, precise, and bloodless, which was, in Conrad's estimation, a temporary condition. He had been watching Caspian ever since, waiting for the right lever. A man as controlled as Caspian Varro was only vulnerable through the things he loved, and for years, Conrad had been frustrated by the answer. Caspian Varro seemed to love nothing, until Tuesday afternoon. Conrad sat in his office and studied the photograph on his screen, taken from 200 meters with a telephoto lens by one of his surveillance team who had no idea what they'd captured. A Mafia boss crouched in a park, face to face with two small boys, and 30 feet behind them, a woman frozen on a bench. His analyst had already run the woman's face. Mira Elson, Halverton General Medical Records, prior address, Rennell District before relocating 8 years ago. No criminal record, no connections to any known organization, completely invisible, which to Conrad meant she had been deliberately made invisible by someone with the resources to scrub a trail. Conrad, how old are the children? Analyst, best estimate from visual, 7 years, possibly 8. Conrad leaned back in his chair, 7 or 8 years. And Caspian Varro, the single coldest human being Conrad had ever negotiated with, had crouched in the middle of a public park like a man struck by lightning. Conrad smiled. Conrad, find her address. Don't approach, just find it. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. Conrad, I need to know everything about anonymous CPS tip procedures in Halverton County, and I need to know how long a custody dispute takes to freeze someone's ability to relocate. He was already building the cage. The eviction notice arrived on Thursday morning. Mira found it slid under her apartment door at 7 a.m. Holding a cup of coffee, she immediately sat down. The notice cited structural safety concerns requiring immediate tenant relocation, a clause her landlord, Mr. Brent, had never once invoked in the 4 years she'd rented the apartment. She called him. He sounded embarrassed and frightened. Mira, Mr. Brent, I've lived here 4 years without a single issue. I know, Ms. Elson, someone bought the building, ma'am, yesterday. I got the paperwork last night. New owner. They want it cleared by end of month. She hung up slowly. End of month was 22 days away. She sat on the edge of the kitchen table and went very still, the way she always did when real danger arrived. Not panicked, not loud, just still, calculating. She was still sitting there when her phone rang, a number she didn't know. Mira, hello? Woman's voice, pleasant, professional. Ms. Aldwin Carr. Hello, is this Mira Elson? This is Ms. Aldwin Carr calling from the Halverton County Child and Family Services Office. We've received a concern report regarding the welfare of 2 children in your care, registered as Dante and Luca Elson. I'd like to schedule a home visit as soon as possible. The cup of coffee toppled off the table and shattered on the floor. Mira did not hear it hit. She called Caspian. She hadn't meant to. She had spent 2 days steeling herself against exactly this, against the gravitational pull of him, against the voice in her head that said, he can fix this, because she knew the price of that kind of fixing. She knew what it cost to let Caspian Varro solve your problems. You paid in your independence, in your choices, in the weight of a world that came with him that you couldn't ever fully put down. But she was staring at an eviction notice and a CPS case file on her table, and her boys were in the next room eating cereal before school, and she dialed. He answered on the first ring. Mira. He moved fast. Caspian. Tell me. She told him. The building sale, the eviction timeline, the CPS call. Her voice was steady. Barely. Caspian. Are you at home? Mira. Yes. I'm sending Reeves with a car. Don't argue, just let him drive the boys to school today. I need to know where they are. Mira. You don't get to... Caspian. Mira. And then, please. The word sat between them like something rare and fragile. Caspian Varro did not please. It wasn't in his vocabulary, wasn't in his world. And somehow that single word undid more of her than all the threats could have. Mira. Fine. For today. Caspian. I'm also sending a lawyer. His name is Dario Fenn. He's expecting your call. He handles family law and civil threats simultaneously, and he doesn't lose. Mira. I can't afford. Caspian. It's taken care of. Mira. I said. Caspian. He owes me a debt. It has nothing to do with money. Let him help you. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. The morning light through the kitchen window felt too bright, too ordinary for what was happening inside this apartment. Mira. Why are you doing this? Before you even know, before any of this is confirmed. Caspian. Because I looked at those boys' faces. I don't need a confirmation, but I'll take one if you'll give it to me. Mira. And if I won't? Caspian. Then I'll protect them anyway, because they're 7 years old and Conrad Steele is coming for them to get to me, and I will not allow that. She said nothing. Caspian. I know you don't trust me. I know what I am, but I need you to believe that whatever else I am, I would not let children be used as weapons. Not ever. The line was quiet. In the next room, Dante laughed at something Luca said. Mira. I'll call the lawyer. The DNA results arrived on a Friday morning. Dario Fenn had expedited the testing. A private lab, chain of custody managed entirely by his firm, results sealed and delivered by courier. Mira had consented to the test without Caspian asking twice. She had known, when she gave her consent, that it was less a confirmation and more a formality. She already knew. She had always known. Caspian received his copy at the same time she received hers. She was at Petra's kitchen table when she opened the envelope. Petra sat across from her, saying nothing, holding her own coffee with both hands. The report was technical and dense and took 2 paragraphs to confirm what fit into 4 words. Paternity established. 99.998% probability. Mira set the paper down. Petra. You okay? Mira. I already knew. Petra. That's not what I asked. Mira looked up at the ceiling. Mira. 8 years ago, I made the only choice I thought I could live with, and I still think I was right. And I also think I have to carry the cost of that choice. And I am okay. Petra reached across the table and put her hand over Mira's. They sat like that for a minute. It was Caspian, she answered. Mira. I got mine too. Caspian. Come to the address I'm sending you. Tonight. Bring the boys. Mira. We are not. They do not know who you are. Caspian. I'm not telling them tonight. I just. Another pause. When his voice came back, it was different. Stripped of the control and the cold and all the layers she'd spent years watching him maintain. I need to see them. That's all. I just need to see them. Mira's throat tightened. She thought about saying no. She thought about every careful wall she'd built, and why she'd built it, and what it had cost to keep it standing. And then she thought about Dante asking, with complete seriousness, whether the man in the park had been a superhero because he hadn't been scared of anything. Mira. 2 hours. That's all I'm promising. They came at 7. Caspian opened the door of a house, not the known address, not anything connected to his name publicly, a quiet brownstone in a quiet street, and the boys walked past him into a house that smelled like wood and old books, and Dante immediately spotted the chess set in the corner and asked if it was real. Caspian. It's real. Dante. Do you know how to play? Caspian. Since I was 5. Dante. I know how too. I taught myself from a book. He looked up with absolute challenge in his eyes. Do you want to play? Something shifted in Caspian's face. Mira caught it from across the room. That brief, involuntary thing, like sunlight through a crack in stone. Caspian. Set it up. Luca sat on the window seat and watched the city below, hands folded in his lap, quiet as a sentinel. Mira stood near the doorway and watched Caspian teach Dante an opening gambit the boy hadn't read in any book, and she watched Luca eventually drift over and take his brother's spot when Dante got bored after 20 minutes, and she watched Caspian lean forward as Luca played better than anyone had a right to at age 7. And Mira stood there and felt something crack open in her chest that she had thought was sealed shut forever. The morning after, Caspian was furious. Not the cold, managed anger she remembered, the kind he used like a tool. This was different. This was something personal and raw, and she felt it the moment he called. Caspian: "You took them from me." Mira: "Good morning to you too." Caspian: 8 years. They had a father for 8 years and I wasn't there, because you decided I wasn't going to be. Mira: "Lower your..." Caspian: "I am speaking at a completely normal volume, and I need you to hear every word. You made a unilateral decision about 2 lives that weren't only yours. You decided what was best for them. You decided what was safe. You..." Mira: "I decided they would live. Yes, that's what I decided." Caspian: "You think I would have let them be hurt?" Mira: "I think you didn't get a choice, Caspian, because the threat was you. Not men coming for you, not rivals, you, your world. The fact that you can sit in a car and receive a call that someone's trying to kill you and continue reading your portfolio like it's weather. I wasn't afraid of the bullets. I was afraid of what it does to children to grow up watching their father treat bullets like weather." A long, uneven silence. Mira: "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. But I need you to understand what I was choosing between." Caspian: "I understand." His voice was very quiet now. "I understand what you were choosing between, and I think you were right to be afraid, and I think you were wrong to run without telling me." Mira: "If I had told you, you would have stopped me from leaving." Caspian: "Yes." Mira: "That's why I didn't tell you." Another long silence. Caspian: "We are not done with this conversation. But right now, Conrad Steele's lawyer filed a motion yesterday to compel a welfare investigation. Dario says we have 5 days before the CPS visit is formally scheduled. I need to talk to you about the plan." Mira: "What plan?" Caspian: "The plan where you and the boys move somewhere safe while I dismantle every angle Conrad has." Mira: "I am not moving my children into a safe house like they're assets." "I'm not offering a safe house. I'm offering the brownstone. It's clean. It's not in my name. It's 3 blocks from Halverton Elementary and has a security system that..." Mira: "No." Mira: "I said no. We are not living in your house. I am not in your orbit. We are 2 separate..." Caspian: "You stopped being separate the minute Conrad's people photographed my sons in a public park." The word sons landed like a fist. Mira said nothing. "I'll give you a day." He hung up. Mira threw her phone at the couch and then sat down on the floor and pressed her face to her knees for approximately 45 seconds, which was all the time she allowed. Then she stood up, called Dario Fenn, and started building her own plan. The attempt on the boys happened on a Wednesday. Mira had refused the brownstone. She had, however, accepted a compromise. Reeves Moran dropped the boys at school each morning in an unremarkable car, and a second security man was positioned outside the school building each afternoon until pickup. She had told the boys there was extra help because of something at work. Dante had accepted this completely. Luca had looked at her for a long moment and then nodded once, which meant he knew she was lying and had decided to let her. She still didn't know whether that was comforting or terrifying. Wednesday was the day the school had a half day. Mira had put it in her calendar and had told Reeves. But someone, and the investigation would later confirm it was a school administrator with a gambling debt and a call from Conrad's men, had sent a message to Reeves at noon claiming the pickup had been handled already, that Mira herself had come early. Reeves had called Mira to confirm. Mira had been in a meeting and her phone was on silent. 40 seconds. That was how long it took from the moment the school's front door opened and a woman Dante did not recognize offered them both hot chocolate and a ride to their mom, to the moment Luca looked at the woman's car and then looked at his brother and said very quietly, "Luca, no." Dante: "What?" Luca: We don't know her. We're supposed to wait for Reeves. He took Dante's arm. We go back inside. The woman smiled and stepped closer. Luca. Hey! He shouted it toward the school's front doors, where the remaining security man had stepped around the corner. Hey! We need help! The woman got back in the car. The car pulled away fast. By the time Reeves arrived 4 minutes later, both boys were in the school office with the principal. Luca seated perfectly still with his arms crossed, and Dante shaking and trying not to show it. When Mira arrived 6 minutes after Reeves and ran through the office door, Luca looked up at her. Luca, I was careful, Mom, like you always say. Mira hit her knees on the office floor and pulled both of them in and could not speak for 30 full seconds. Caspian was there in 12 minutes. He walked in through the school's side door, Reeves behind him, and when he saw both boys whole and unharmed, he stopped in the doorway and a visible wave of something moved through him. Not relief, something more than relief, something more frightening than relief. He crossed the room and crouched in front of Luca, which was a thing that people did not generally do, come directly to Luca before Dante. Most people found Dante easier, brighter, more approachable. Caspian went to Luca. Caspian, you made a decision under pressure, and you made the right one. Luca looked at him. Luca, who are you? The room went completely still. Caspian looked at Mira. The question in his eyes was plain, direct, and for once not demanding anything. He was asking permission. Mira stood up slowly. She looked at Caspian, then at her sons, then at the floor, then back at Caspian. 8 years of silence and walls and careful distance, and her son had just screamed for help in a school parking lot because the man she'd run from had made an enemy who wanted leverage through her children. The math was brutal and clear, and she had always known it would come to this. She'd just needed it to come on her terms, and it hadn't, and that was done. Mira. She stopped. He's someone who's going to help us. Dante, already recovering his nerve, squinted at Caspian. Dante, you're the chess man from the park. Caspian, I am. Dante, why does my brother look like you? A long pause. Caspian, because I'm your father. Chapter 10. The fallout was not clean. Dante cried, unexpectedly, loudly, and then got angry because he'd cried in front of a stranger. Luca said nothing for 2 full hours and sat by the window in the brownstone. Mira had agreed to stay, just for the night, just until it was safe, and looked at the street below with those ancient, measuring eyes. Mira sat with Caspian in the kitchen while Petra watched the boys. Mira, I don't know how to do this. Caspian, neither do I. Mira, that's not reassuring. Caspian, I know. He looked at his hands, the tattoos, the knuckles, the visible history of a life that didn't apologize for itself. I'm going to make a deal with you. Mira, I don't make deals with... Caspian, not a business deal, He stopped, looked at her. I'm going to step down from the Halverton operation. Mira blinked. Caspian, I've been building an exit for 2 years. It was always theoretical. Tonight, it becomes a timeline. He said it the way he said everything, plainly, without drama, like it was simply true. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I looked at that school parking lot 40 minutes ago, and my son was almost taken by Conrad Steele's men, and I will not. I cannot. His voice stopped. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Mira to see the thing underneath all of it. Caspian, I cannot be the reason they are in danger. Not anymore. You were right to be afraid of my world. I just needed to understand it from inside a moment I couldn't control. Mira stared at him. Mira, if you step down, what does that do to Conrad? Caspian, it removes my leverage as his enemy. Without the Empire, there's nothing for him to take. But it also exposes a gap. He'll see it as weakness. He'll move fast to take what I'm leaving behind. Mira, So stepping down makes him more dangerous in the short term. Caspian: Yes, which is why I need 2 weeks, and I need you and the boys here until it's done. He slid a key across the kitchen table. She looked at it, didn't touch it. Mira: 2 weeks. Caspian: 2 weeks. Then you have every freedom I couldn't give you 8 years ago. She picked up the key. Dario Fenn appeared in court on Monday and systematically dismantled the CPS complaint in 4 hours. He presented surveillance footage of the parking lot incident, Luca shouting for help, the unidentified woman and the fleeing car, and argued, successfully, that the welfare complaint had been filed as a retaliatory legal maneuver and that the children's actual safety was being threatened not by their mother's care, but by the party who had filed the complaint. The judge ordered the complaint suspended pending investigation. Conrad Steele sat in the back of that courtroom and watched, and his expression never changed, and that was more frightening than anger. He moved to Wave 3 that same afternoon. He filed a federal complaint through his contact in the bureau, the same one he'd once groomed to bring down Caspian, alleging that Caspian Varro was using a family cover to launder money through a residential property. He named the brownstone. He named Mira. Caspian was informed by Dario at 4 p.m. By 5 p.m., Caspian had made 3 phone calls. The first was to a federal judge he had quietly kept out of a scandal 3 years prior. The second was to a journalist, not a corrupt one, an actual journalist, to whom he gave a documented, structured account of Conrad Steele's existing federal contacts, the names of the agents on his payroll, and the specifics of the 3-year skimming operation from the joint shipping venture. The third call was to Conrad directly. Conrad: Caspian? Caspian: You went after my children. Conrad: I went after your weakness. There's a difference. Caspian: My children are not my weakness, Conrad. They're my reason. A pause. There's a difference. Conrad: Is that a threat? Caspian: No, I don't make threats. I'm calling to tell you what happens next. The journalist publishes at midnight. The federal dossier I submitted this afternoon contains 17 pieces of evidence, each sourced and authenticated. 3 of your men will be in federal custody by morning, and your port access licenses, the ones you've been holding under the shell company in Delaware, will be frozen by end of week. Caspian: You spent 4 months building a cage around me. I built a house of cards around you 3 years ago and have been waiting to breathe on it. Conrad: You won't walk away from the empire. Men like you don't. Caspian: Men like me don't fall in love in parks either. Apparently, I'm not the man you mapped. He hung up. The arrest of Conrad Steele's key lieutenants happened before dawn. By morning, the story was national. Federal corruption within the Halverton Port Authority. 3 bureau agents suspended. A shell company under investigation. The name Steele was being run through a document shredder by every associated party that could reach one. Reeves called at 7 a.m. to confirm that the surveillance on the brownstone had gone dark overnight. Mira was making breakfast. She had 2 boys trying to climb her like she was a tree, and Petra had slept over on the couch, and the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and coffee, and it was the most normal morning she had experienced in a week and a half. Caspian appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7:15. He looked tired, genuinely, visibly tired. Not the hollow-eyed professional exhaustion of a man overworked, but the deep tiredness of a man who had put something down that he had been carrying for a very long time. Dante: Chessman is here. Luca already eating. Dad? The word was matter-of-fact, quiet, like Luca had been turning it over in his internal calculator since the school office, had run the numbers, and had now simply filed it under fact. No drama, no ceremony. Caspian sat down at the kitchen table. Mira put a cup of coffee in front of him without a word. He looked up at her. Caspian: It's done. Mira: I heard. Caspian: Conrad won't have any reach left within a week. Dario's filed the counter-motion on the eviction. The building sale has been tied up in a procedural hold. You have, at minimum, 6 months at your apartment. Mira: I know. He called me too. Caspian. Good. A pause. Dante. Are you staying for breakfast? Mom made eggs. She burns the toast, but the eggs are really good. Mira. I do not burn the toast. Dante. Every time, Mom. Every single time. Caspian looked at the toast, then at Mira. The absolute ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Mira looked at the ceiling. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday that felt like a different world entirely, Mira met with Dario Fenn in his office on Carver Street. He walked her through the documents on the table. Dario. The eviction has been fully dismissed. The building's new ownership has been traced to a steel-adjacent shell company, which means the sale itself is being challenged. Your tenancy is protected for at least 12 months while that plays out. Mira. Good. Dario. The CPS file has been closed. Ms. Carr herself submitted a statement confirming that the report was filed under suspicious circumstances and that there was no legitimate welfare concern on file. Mira. I know. She called to apologize, actually. I think she felt awful. Dario. She should. She was used. He slid another folder toward her. This is the custody agreement Caspian has submitted for your review. He is not seeking primary custody, joint custody, or any form of legal authority over your residential decisions. He's asked for defined visitation, specifically 2 evenings per week and alternate weekends, subject to your approval at each stage. The arrangement is entirely flexible, and you retain primary parental authority in all matters. Mira stared at the folder. Mira. He could have pushed for more. Dario. He specifically instructed me not to. Mira. Why? Dario looked at her over his glasses with the patient expression of a man who had seen many things. Dario. He said, and I'm quoting, "She ran because I took up too much of the room. Make sure the agreement leaves her all the room she needs." Mira sat very still for a moment. Then she opened the folder and read. She went to the park that evening, the same one, Halverton Park, and sat on the same bench, not because it meant anything in particular, because it was Thursday evening and the boys had soccer practice, and she had 45 minutes, and she needed to sit somewhere that had air in it. Caspian appeared 10 minutes later. She had not called him. He had not called her. He simply sat down on the bench beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the cart near the east gate, and he handed one over, and they sat there in the late evening light and did not speak for a while. The park looked the same. The trees were the same. The path where he had crouched to look at the boys was the same strip of paved walkway, just emptier now. Mira. Dante wants to know if you'll come to his soccer match on Saturday. Caspian. Yes. Mira. He wants you to coach him before it. Apparently you have good eyes for the game. She paused. I don't know when he decided that. Caspian. We watched 2 matches together last week. He has opinions. Mira. He has opinions about everything. Caspian. He gets it honestly. She looked at him sideways. He was watching the park. There was something different about the way he sat. The perpetual readiness was still there, the alertness, but the edge of it was different, like a blade still sharp but not drawn. Mira. The operation. How does that sit with you? Caspian. The exit? Mira. Giving up what you've built for 30 years. He thought about it, genuinely thought about it, which was one of the things she had always respected. He never answered before he was ready. Caspian. I built it because there was nothing else to build. There was nothing else There was no other reason to be strategic, to be disciplined. The empire was the reason. It was the only thing I trusted. Pause. Caspian. That's not true anymore. The last of the evening sunlight came through the trees in long, golden lines. Mira. The exit takes how long? Caspian. 8 to 14 months. There are partners, assets, obligations. It gets unwound carefully or it gets unwound badly. I choose carefully. Mira. And after? Caspian. I have legitimate holdings, shipping, real estate, 2 manufacturing interests, enough to be Ordinary. By my standards. Mira almost smiled. Mira. Ordinary. Caspian. I know how that sounds. Mira. It sounds like something I'd need to see before I believed. Caspian. That's fair. A pause. Mira. I signed the custody agreement this afternoon. He turned to look at her. Mira. I added one clause. It's in the notes. Caspian. What does it say? Mira. It says the arrangement is reviewed annually and rebuilt by mutual agreement, not by lawyers, by us. He looked at her for a long moment. The evening had gone soft and blue around them, the park quieting down, the sound of distant children's voices fading toward home. Caspian. By us. Mira. By the people who actually know what they're doing and what they're choosing. She looked back at the path. I'm not promising anything. I'm just leaving room. He nodded slowly. Caspian. Then I'll stay inside whatever room you leave. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in early autumn, Halverton Park looked like a different country. The trees had gone amber and copper, and that deep theatrical red that only happened for a few weeks each year, and the light through them was the kind of light that made everything look like a painting you'd want to live inside. Mira was sitting on the same bench. She had a coffee, 2 empty soccer cleats beside her, and a book she hadn't opened, and she was watching the open grass area where Caspian was teaching Luca and Dante a passing drill that Dante was taking very seriously, and Luca was methodically dismantling with suggestions Caspian was genuinely considering. Petra sat beside her. Petra. Luca just corrected his technique. Mira. Luca corrects everyone's technique. Petra. Caspian just agreed with him. Mira. Luca's usually right. Petra was quiet for a moment. Petra. You look different. Mira. I'm sitting down. I always look different when I'm sitting down. Petra. You look like someone who slept. Mira thought about that. Mira. I did, actually. Petra. For how long? Mira. 8 hours. I didn't realize it until my alarm went off and I thought it was broken. Petra laughed, soft and warm. On the grass, Dante scored a point in whatever game he had unilaterally invented and crowed about it loudly. Caspian watched him with an expression that he hadn't quite learned to hide yet, the full, unguarded one, raw at the edges, the one that appeared every single time one of the boys did something unexpected, like he was perpetually being surprised by his own good fortune. Mira watched him watch her son. She thought about 8 years ago. She thought about the choice she'd made and what it had cost and what it had saved and whether she'd make it again. She thought about the conversation she'd had with Caspian last week in the kitchen of the brownstone, where he still spent more evenings than his own apartment, where the chess set had been claimed by both boys, where the window seat had become Luca's reading spot. He had asked her what she needed, not what he could offer, not what he thought was best, what she needed. And she had said, time. I need time to learn who you are now instead of who you were. And he had nodded and refilled her coffee and not pushed. That was the thing she hadn't expected. Not the protection, not the lawyers, not the sacrifice of the empire. She had expected those, because that was the kind of man he was. What she hadn't expected was the patience, the restraint, the way he made room and then stayed inside it. She was still watching him when he looked over at her. Just a glance, ordinary, checking, the way you checked on people you cared about. She held it for a second. Then she looked back down at her book and almost smiled. Dante. Mom, did you see that? Mira. I saw it. Dante. Tell me you saw it. Mira. I saw it, Dante. Dante. Dad, she saw it. Triumphant, spinning, absolutely incandescent with 7-year-old satisfaction. Caspian looked at Mira again. This time she didn't look away. She just shook her head slowly, the expression of someone who has been thoroughly outmaneuvered by the universe and has decided, after long deliberation, to find it funny. He walked over. Not urgently, not with purpose, just slowly, across the autumn grass, and he sat down on the bench beside her, Not too close, but close enough, and he put his elbows on his knees and watched their sons argue cheerfully about who had scored and who hadn't. Mira, you know this means he's going to want to come every Saturday. Caspian, I know. Mira, and Luca's going to want to redesign the passing drill. Caspian, he already did, twice. His version is better. A pause. Mira, you're not as terrible at this as I expected. Caspian, you're not as closed as you expected. She looked at him. He looked at her. And the morning kept going, warm, ordinary, unremarkable to anyone passing through the park. Just a woman on a bench, a man beside her, 2 boys playing on the grass, and the kind of quiet that only comes when every storm has finally, fully passed. Mira reached over and took his coffee. She took a sip. He looked at her sideways. She handed it back without a word. And Caspian Varro, the most feared man in Halverton, who had broken empires and survived enemies that governments couldn't touch, sat in the autumn light of a public park and felt something he had no word for, something that ran deeper than strategy, deeper than empire, deeper than everything he had spent his whole life building. He felt it root, and he let it.